You know that feeling when you're alone in the woods at night? When every shadow looks like something watching you back. When every branch that snaps makes your heart jump. Most people, they get scared and they leave. They go home to their warm beds and their locked doors, and they forget about it by morning. But what if you can't leave? What if those woods are your job? Mike Torres was a park ranger for 15 years. 15 years of hiking trails, helping lost campers, and dealing with bears that got too close to the picnic tables. He thought he'd seen everything the wilderness had to throw at him. He was wrong. This is a story of what happened in the summer of 2023, deep in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. A story the National Park Service doesn't want you to hear. A story that ended with an entire section of forest being closed to the public forever. By the time you finish listening to this, you'll understand why Mike Torres hasn't slept through a single night since. Why he moved 3,000 miles away to a desk job in Florida. And why he still checks his locks 3 times before bed. Because some things in the forest aren't supposed to be there. Mike Torres wasn't supposed to be at Devil's Ridge Station. He'd been working the visitor center at Mount Baker for 8 years. Good job. Safe job. Lots of tourists asking where the bathrooms were and buying postcards. But budget cuts hit hard that spring. The Forest Service needed bodies in the remote stations, and Mike had the experience. So in June 2023, they packed him up and sent him 200 miles deeper into the wilderness than he'd ever worked before. Devil's Ridge Station sits at the end of a dirt road that takes 40 minutes to drive on a good day. The nearest town is Millfield, population 847, and that's still an hour away through mountain passes that get snowed in half the year. Mike's first day on the job, the ranger he was replacing, a guy named Pete Kowalski who'd been there for 12 years, gave him the tour. It's quiet out here, Pete told him as they walked the perimeter of the station. Real quiet. Sometimes you won't see another person for weeks. Pete showed him the radio equipment, the emergency supplies, the trail maps. Everything seemed normal. Standard stuff Mike had used 100 times before. But then Pete stopped at a map on the wall. A big topographic map of the entire region, covered in colored pins and marked trails. He pointed to a section in the northeast corner. See this area here? Pete said, Sector 7. We call it the dead zone. The section Pete pointed to was blank. No trails marked. No campsites. No ranger stations. Just empty green space that stretched for miles. Why is it blank? Mike asked. Pete was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because people don't come back from there. Mike laughed. He thought Pete was joking, making up stories to mess with the new guy. Come on, Mike said. What's really out there? Pete didn't laugh back. He looked Mike straight in the eye and said, I'm not kidding. In 12 years, I've sent 3 search and rescue teams into that area. Good people. Experienced people. 2 of those teams, we never found them. Mike figured Pete was just trying to scare him. Every ranger station had its ghost stories, its urban legends. Hell, tourists love that stuff. But as Pete was loading his truck to leave, he turned back one more time. Mike, he said, I'm going to give you some advice. When the sun goes down, you stay inside. You lock the doors. And if you hear anything moving around out there at night, anything at all, you don't go check it out. You turn up the radio and you pretend you didn't hear it. Pete drove away that afternoon, leaving Mike alone in 50,000 acres of wilderness. Mike thought he was being dramatic. He'd learn different soon enough. The first 3 weeks were exactly what Pete said they'd be. Quiet. Mike fell into a routine. Wake up at 6. Check the weather reports. Monitor the radio for any hikers checking in or out of the backcountry. Do maintenance around the station. Fill out paperwork. Go to bed by 9. Simple. Boring, even. The only hikers he saw were day trippers who stuck to the main trails. Nice families with kids and dogs. College students with fancy gear they didn't know how to use. Retirees with expensive cameras. Normal people doing normal things. Mike did his weekly patrols of the marked trails. Everything looked good. trail markers in place. No fallen trees blocking the paths. No signs of illegal camping or fires. But he noticed something odd about Sector 7. The blank area on the map. Every trail that headed in that direction had warning signs. Trail closed. Authorized personnel only. Dangerous conditions. Mike figured it was probably unstable ground. Maybe old mine shafts or something. The mountains were full of abandoned mining operations from the 1800s. Then, on his fourth week, Mike got his first real call. It was a Tuesday morning about 10 o'clock. The radio crackled to life. Devil's Ridge. This is Search and Rescue Dispatch. We've got a missing hiker report. Solo male, 34 years old, experienced backpacker. Last seen 3 days ago heading north on the Cascade Trail. Over. Mike grabbed his map. The Cascade Trail ran right along the edge of Sector 7. Copy, dispatch. Can you give me a description and his planned route? Over. Hiker's name is David Chun. 5'10", black hair, wearing a red jacket and gray backpack. He filed a backcountry permit for a 5-day solo trip. Planned to loop around and come back on the Pine Ridge Trail. Family expected him back yesterday. Over. Mike traced the route on his map. It was a common loop. Takes most hikers about 4 days if they're moving at a good pace. The problem was part of that loop skirted right along the border of Sector 7. Copy, dispatch. I'll head out and start a preliminary search. We'll report back in 4 hours. Over. Mike loaded his pack with emergency supplies and headed out. He figured he'd find David at one of the designated campsites, maybe with a twisted ankle or a broken piece of gear. Happens all the time. Mike hiked for 6 hours that day. He checked every campsite along David's planned route. He called David's name until his voice was hoarse. He looked for any sign that someone had been there recently. Nothing. Not a footprint. Not a piece of trash. Not a single broken branch or scuff mark on a rock. It was like David Chun had just vanished. Dispatch, this is Devil's Ridge. No sign of the missing hiker. On the planned route. Requesting full search and rescue response. Over. Copy, Devil's Ridge. SAR teams will be there first light tomorrow. Good work out there. Over. Mike hiked back to the station as the sun was setting. He kept thinking about something Pete had said. People don't come back from there. But David hadn't gone into Sector 7. At least, not according to his permit. He was supposed to stay on the marked trails. Mike made dinner and tried to forget about it. Sometimes hikers change their plans. Maybe David decided to extend his trip. Maybe he took a different route home. But that night, as Mike was getting ready for bed, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Sound. Silence, then very faint. Someone calling for help in the distance. Someone was out there in the dark, calling for help. The search and rescue teams arrived at dawn. 23 people. Dogs. Even a helicopter. Mike had heard the voice calling for help 3 more times during the night. Always from the same direction. Always from somewhere near Sector 7. He told the SAR team leader, a woman named Sarah Martinez, who'd been running search operations in the area for 10 years. You sure it was a human voice? Sarah asked. Positive. Mike said, someone's out there. Sarah looked at the map, then looked at Mike. That's not possible, she said. We've had teams sweep that entire area twice in the last 5 years. There's nothing out there but trees and rocks. They spent 3 days searching. The dogs picked up David's scent on the main trail, but lost it after about 2 miles. Just lost it, like he disappeared into thin air. The helicopter crew said they spotted something on day 2, a flash of red in the trees, about half a mile into Sector 7. Could have been David's jacket. But when the ground team hiked to that location, they found nothing. Mike was with the team that went to check it out. 5 experienced searchers, including 2 local guides who've been hiking these mountains their entire lives. The spot was wrong. That's the only way Mike could describe it. The trees grew in weird patterns. Branches twisted in directions that didn't make sense. The ground was soft and spongy, like walking on a mattress. And it was quiet, dead quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind through the trees. One of the local guides, an old-timer named Frank, stopped walking. "We need to go back," Frank said. "Why?" Mike asked. The helicopter crew saw something right here. Frank was looking around like he expected something to jump out at him. "This place, it's not right. We shouldn't be here." That's when Mike heard it again, the voice calling for help. But this time it was clearer. "Help me, please. I can't find my way out." The voice was coming from deeper in the trees, maybe 100 yards ahead. Mike started walking toward it, but Frank grabbed his arm. "Don't," Frank said. "That's not David." "How do you know?" Mike asked. Frank pointed at the ground. In the soft dirt, there were footprints. Human footprints. But they were going in circles. The same footprints, over and over, like someone had been walking in the same pattern for hours. "That voice has been calling for help in this exact spot for 3 years," Frank said. "Every search team hears it. But when we get close enough to see who's making it..." Frank didn't finish the sentence. The search team called off on day 4. They covered every inch of the area where David was supposed to be. The official report said he'd probably fallen into a ravine or been attacked by wildlife. But Mike knew better. David Chin was still out there, somewhere in Sector 7, and he was still calling for help. 2 weeks after David Chin disappeared, Mike got another call. "Devil's Ridge, this is dispatch. We got another missing persons report. Family of 4 this time. The Hendersons. Mom, dad, 2 kids, ages 8 and 12. They were camping at Pine Lake. Haven't checked in for 48 hours. Over. Pine Lake was only 3 miles from the station. Popular spot for family camping. Safe, well-marked trails. Designated campsites with fire rings and bare boxes. Mike hiked out there within an hour. The Henderson campsite was odd. Their tent was still up. Sleeping bags were laid out. Food was still sitting on the picnic table. A pot of what looked like soup was sitting on the camp stove, cold but not spoiled, like they'd just stepped away for a few minutes and never came back. Mike searched the campsite carefully. The Hendersons' car was still in the parking lot. All their gear was accounted for. Wallets, car keys, cell phones, everything was there, but no people. Mike called dispatch and requested another full search operation. This time, they brought in 30 searchers. More dogs. 2 helicopters. News crews showed up. The Henderson family had connections. Mr. Henderson was a successful lawyer in Seattle, and Mrs. Henderson was a teacher. Their disappearance made the evening news. The search went on for a full week. They found the first clue on day 3. Katie Henderson's pink sneaker, hanging from a tree branch about a mile from their campsite. The tree was 12 feet tall. No way an 8-year-old girl could have gotten her shoe up there. No way she would have taken it off and thrown it, either. The dogs picked up the family scent near the shoe, but just like with David Chun, the trail went cold after a few hundred yards. Mike was with the team that found the second clue. They were searching a steep ravine about 2 miles from Pine Lake when one of the searchers yelled, "Over here! I found something." It was 12-year-old Tommy Henderson's baseball cap, but it wasn't just lying on the ground. It was wedged into a crack in a rock face, about 30 feet up the side of the ravine. The rock face was smooth, impossible to climb without ropes and gear, and there was no way a 12-year-old boy could have gotten up there, even with help. Mike stared up at that cap for a long time. He was starting to understand what Pete had tried to tell him, what Frank had meant when he said Sector 7 wasn't right. On day 5 of the search, they found something that made everyone stop talking. It was a digital camera, Mr. Henderson's camera, according to the serial number. They found it buried under a pile of leaves, about 50 yards from where Tommy's cap had been wedged in the rock. The camera still worked. Mike was there, When they turned it on and scrolled through the photos, the first pictures were normal. Family shots at the campsite, the kids roasting marshmallows, Mrs. Henderson reading a book by the lake. But the last few photos were taken in complete darkness. The camera's flash had gone off, but all you could see were trees. Thick, twisted trees that looked like they were moving. And in the background of the last photo, shapes. Human-shaped shadows standing between the trees. Too many shadows. More than 4. The official search was called off after 7 days. The Henderson family was declared missing, presumed dead. But Mike knew they weren't dead. They were somewhere in Sector 7, just like David Chun. And every night, when the sun went down and the forest got quiet, Mike could hear them calling. All of them. After the Henderson family disappeared, Mike stopped sleeping well. Every night, around 11 o'clock, he'd hear them. Voices in the distance, calling for help. David Chen's voice, asking someone to please help him find his way out. Mrs. Henderson, calling for her children. Tommy and Katie, crying for their mom and dad. Mike started keeping a journal, writing down every time he heard the voices, where they seemed to be coming from, what they were saying. July 15th, 11:23 p.m., David's voice again. Same location as always. Please, someone help me. I've been walking for days. July 16th, 11:45 p.m., Mrs. Henderson. She's crying, saying she can't find Tommy and Katie, begging someone to help her look. July 18th, 12:15 a.m., all of them at once. Overlapping voices. Can't make out individual words, but they sound scared. Mike called dispatch twice to report the voices. Both times, they told him they'd send someone to check it out, but no one ever came. He started to realize that dispatch thought he was losing it. Stress from the disappearances. Isolation. Hearing things that weren't there. But Mike knew what he was hearing. On July 20th, Mike decided to do something about it. He waited until just after 11 p.m., when the voices usually started. Then he grabbed his flashlight, his radio, and his service weapon, and headed out into the darkness. Pete had told him never to go outside at night, never check out strange noises. But people were out there, lost people who needed help. Mike followed the voices deeper into the woods than he'd ever gone before, past the marked trails, past the warning signs, into Sector 7. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but it didn't seem to go very far. Like the darkness was thicker here, heavier. The voices got clearer as he walked. He could make out individual words now. Help us. We're lost. Please, we have children. Mike walked for what felt like hours. The voices always seemed to be just ahead of him, just around the next tree, just over the next ridge. But he never got closer. And slowly, Mike started to realize something was wrong. His GPS wasn't working. The display showed nothing but static. His compass was spinning wildly, unable to find magnetic north. And when he turned around to head back to the station, he couldn't see his flashlight beam behind him. The path he'd just walked was gone, swallowed by darkness. Dispatch! This is Devil's Ridge Station. I'm lost. GPS is down. Compass isn't working. Request immediate backup. Over. Static. Dispatch, do you copy? This is Ranger Torres. I need help. Over. More static. Mike tried his cell phone. No signal. He was alone in the darkness, surrounded by voices of people who'd been missing for weeks. And he was starting to understand that he might not make it back to the station. Mike walked for 3 more hours, trying to find his way back. Every direction looked the same. Every tree looked familiar, but wrong. And the voices were getting closer. Finally, just before dawn, Mike saw a light through the trees. The ranger station. Somehow, he'd made it back. But when he checked his GPS the next morning, it showed that he'd walked 17 miles in a straight line away from the station. That was impossible. The station was right where he'd left it. He'd never been more than a few hundred yards from home. but his GPS said otherwise. Mike spent that entire day checking his equipment. Everything worked fine. GPS was accurate. Compass pointed true north. Radio had perfect reception. But Mike knew something had happened to him out there in Sector 7. Something that didn't make sense. And that night, when the voices started calling again, Mike did what Pete had told him to do. He stayed inside. He locked the doors. And he turned up the radio. But he could still hear them. All of them. Calling his name now. Mike couldn't take it anymore. The voices were getting stronger every night. More insistent. And they weren't just calling for help anymore. They were calling his name. Mike. Mike Torres, come help us, Mike. Mike decided he needed answers. Real answers. He drove to the county library in Millfield and started researching the history of Sector 7. What he found made his blood run cold. The first disappearance in that area was in 1887. A surveyor named William Hayes sent a map the region for the railroad. He was found 3 weeks later, wandering naked to the forest 50 miles away. He claimed he'd been walking in circles for months, hearing voices calling for help. Hayes spent the rest of his life in an asylum. 1923, a hunting party of 6 men. Only 2 made it out. They said the other 4 had walked into the trees and never came back. The survivors described hearing their lost friends calling for help every night for years afterward. 1955, a family camping trip. The Kowalskis, Pete's relatives, Mike realized, 3 adults, 4 children, gone without a trace. Their campsite was found intact, just like the Hendersons. 1978, 2 Forest Service rangers sent to investigate reports of missing hikers. Neither returned. Their truck was found at the edge of Sector 7, keys still in the ignition. The pattern went back over a century. Every few years, someone would disappear in that area. Sometimes individuals, sometimes groups. Always the same story. They vanished without a trace, leaving behind their belongings and no sign of where they'd gone. But the most disturbing thing Mike found was a report from 1963. A team of geologists had been sent to survey Sector 7 for potential mining operations. They'd used ground-penetrating radar to map the area. What they found defied explanation. Underground, about 30 feet below the surface, there was a massive hollow space. Not a natural cave system. The radar showed it had straight walls, perfect angles, like a structure that was over 2 miles long and half a mile wide. The geologist's report was classified immediately. The mining operation was canceled, and Sector 7 was quietly designated as permanently off-limits to the public. Mike made copies of everything he could find and drove back to the station. That night, he spread the documents across his desk and tried to make sense of it all. Whatever was under Sector 7, it had been there for a long time, longer than anyone realized, and it was still active. Mike looked at his journal entries. The voices he'd been hearing weren't just random calls for help. They followed a pattern. Every night, the voices started in the same location. They moved in the same direction. And they always ended at the same spot, directly above where the geologists had found that underground structure. Mike realized that everyone who disappeared in Sector 7 was still there. All of them. David Chun, the Henderson family, the hunting party from 1923, the Kowalski family, the Forest Service Rangers from 1978, everyone who'd ever walked into those trees. They were all still there, somewhere underground, calling for help. Mike made a decision that night. He was going to find them. All of them. He was going to go into Sector 7 during daylight, when he could see where he was going. He was going to find the entrance to whatever was down there, and he was going to bring those people home. Mike spent the rest of the night preparing. Extra batteries for his flashlight, emergency flares, enough food and water for 3 days. His GPS, his compass, his radio, everything he'd need for a rescue operation. As the sun came up, Mike locked the ranger station and headed into Sector 7. He had no idea what he was going to find down there, but he knew he couldn't listen to those voices calling for help for one more night. The last anyone heard from Ranger Mike Torres was a radio transmission at 2:47 p.m. on July 23rd, 2023. The transmission was picked up by the Forest Service Dispatch Center in Seattle. Here's a complete recording. Mayday, Mayday! This is Ranger Torres at Devil's Ridge Station. I found them. I found all of them. They're down here, but they're not. Listen to me very carefully. Do not send anyone into Sector 7. Do not send search teams. Do not send anyone. Seal it off. Seal the whole area off and never let anyone go in there again. There's something down here with them. Something that's been keeping them here. It feeds on people getting lost. It makes you walk in circles until you can't find your way out, and then you become part of it. You become another voice calling for help, trying to lure other people in. David Chin is here, the Henderson family, dozens of others. They're all here and they're still conscious. They know what's happening to them, but they can't stop calling for help. They can't stop being bait. I can hear it moving. It knows I'm here. It's coming for me. If anyone hears this, you have to promise me something. You have to make sure no one else comes looking for me. No search teams. No rescue operations. Just seal off Sector 7 forever. It's getting dark down here. I can see lights moving. I can hear them calling my name now. All of them. David, the Hendersons, they're trying to help her find me. Tell my wife I love her. Tell her I'm sorry. And whatever you do, don't come looking for me. Don't let anyone come looking for any of us. Search and rescue teams found Mike's abandoned truck at the edge of Sector 7 2 days later. His radio equipment was missing. There was no sign of a struggle. The Forest Service officially classified Mike Torres as missing, presumed dead due to a hiking accident. But 3 days after Mike's last transmission, they quietly installed a permanent fence around the entire Sector 7 area. Warning signs were posted every 50 feet. The area was reclassified from closed for maintenance to permanently restricted, no public access. The official reason given was geological instability and environmental hazards. No search operation was ever mounted for Ranger Mike Torres. Local hikers still report hearing voices in the woods near Sector 7. Voices calling for help, asking someone to please come find them. Park rangers are instructed to tell anyone who reports these voices that they're probably hearing echoes or wind to the trees or maybe coyotes. But the rangers know better, because on quiet nights, when the wind is still and the forest is silent, they can hear the voices too. All of them. Mike Torres, David Chun, the Henderson family, everyone who ever walked into Sector 7 and never came back. They're still out there, still calling, still waiting for someone to come help them, and they always will be.